A dying father's secret buried beneath a frozen well saved his homeless Navy SEAL son, and a loyal dog knew where to dig. Winter came with no firewood. A homeless Navy SEAL's dog found 20 tons beneath his father's well. As snow closed in around a collapsing mountain cabin, former Navy SEAL Cole Harper faced a brutal truth. He didn't have enough firewood to survive. But when his retired K-9 partner Shadow became obsessed with an abandoned well behind the cabin, he uncovered a mystery that would lead to a hidden world beneath the mountain, and a father's final act of love that changed everything. Comment 1 if you believe loyalty can save a life, or 0 if you think survival depends only on yourself. And tell us where you're watching from. The first snow had not fallen yet, but the mountains already knew it was coming. Gray clouds drifted low across the Bitterroot Range, dragging long shadows over the pine-covered slopes of western Montana. The peaks disappeared behind curtains of mist. The wind carried the smell of approaching winter, sharp, cold, and ancient. Cole Harper gripped the steering wheel of his battered pickup truck and stared through the windshield. The truck rattled as it crawled up the narrow mountain road. Beside him sat Shadow. The German shepherd watched the forest with alert amber eyes. His muzzle had begun to gray with age, but there was still something powerful about him. Something steady, something that reminded Cole of the life he used to have. The truck rounded a bend. Then the cabin appeared. Cole slowed. For several seconds he said nothing. The cabin sat alone on a small clearing overlooking a valley of dark pine trees. Once, long ago, it might have been beautiful. Now it looked abandoned by time itself. The roof sagged. Several windows were boarded shut. The porch leaned dangerously to one side. Tall weeds pushed through broken steps. Behind the cabin stood a weathered old well and a collapsing woodshed. Everything looked tired, forgotten, like the man who had lived there. Cole killed the engine. Silence settled over the mountain. For a moment, neither he nor Shadow moved. Then Cole exhaled slowly. So this is it. Shadow tilted his head. Cole opened the truck door and stepped into the cold air. The wind hit his face immediately. October. Still weeks before winter. Yet the temperature already carried a bite, the kind that whispered warnings. Cole stood motionless, staring at the cabin, his father's cabin. Ethan Harper had lived here alone for nearly 15 years. 15 years without neighbors, without family, without visitors. At least that's what everyone said. Cole hadn't seen the old man in almost a decade. Not since one angry argument neither of them had ever apologized for. Now Ethan was dead. A heart attack. Found by a county worker checking rural properties after a storm. Buried before Cole even arrived. No goodbye. No final conversation, just paperwork. A key and a cabin nobody wanted. Shadow jumped down from the truck and immediately began exploring. His paws crunched through frost-covered grass. Cole watched him disappear around the side of the house. The dog seemed happier than he had in months. Maybe because this place was quiet. Maybe because dogs didn't carry regret the way humans did. Cole grabbed his duffel bag and headed toward the cabin. The front door groaned when he pushed it open. Dust floated through pale beams of sunlight. The smell hit him immediately. Old wood, cold stone, time. The interior looked exactly how he imagined his father had lived. Simple, practical, lonely. A small kitchen, a cast-iron stove, a rough wooden table, bookshelves, a fireplace built from river stones. Nothing fancy, nothing comfortable, just enough. Cole set down his bag. The floor creaked beneath his boots. His eyes drifted to a photograph hanging near the fireplace. Ethan Harper, 20 years younger, standing beside a horse. Smiling, Cole stared at the picture. It felt strange. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his father smile. Maybe he never really had. The memory was gone now. Shadow returned and sat beside him. Cole rubbed the dog's neck. Guess we're home. The word felt wrong. Home. He hadn't had one in years. Not after the divorce. Not after the drinking. Not after losing everything. The Navy had given him purpose. The civilian world had taken it away. Now he was 59 years old, living out of a pickup truck, sleeping in parking lots, trying to outrun memories that followed him everywhere. And somehow he had ended up back here. at the very place he'd spent most of his adult life avoiding. The wind rattled the windows. Cole glanced outside. Dark clouds gathered over the western ridges. A storm was coming. He could feel it. That evening he drove into the nearest town. The sign at the edge of the highway read, Ravens Creek Population 812. A single main street cut through the town. Old brick buildings lined both sides. A hardware store, a gas station, a feed supply, a barber shop. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where strangers stood out. Cole parked outside a diner called Holloway's. Warm yellow light glowed through the windows. The smell of coffee and frying bacon greeted him as he stepped inside. Conversations quieted briefly. Not enough to be rude, just enough for people to notice. Cole ignored the looks. Years of military service had taught him how to be invisible, even when everyone was watching. Shadow followed closely at his side. Several customers smiled when they saw the dog. One elderly woman reached down and scratched his ears. Handsome boy. Shadow accepted the attention politely. Cole ordered coffee and a simple meal. The waitress introduced herself as Grace Holloway. She looked to be in her early 60s, kind eyes, quick smile. The sort of person who treated strangers like neighbors. You Ethan Harper's son? She asked. Cole nodded. Heard about your father. Grace hesitated. He was a stubborn old man, Cole snorted. That sounds right. Grace laughed softly. Most folks around here respected him, even when they didn't understand him. Before Cole could ask what that meant, the bell above the diner door rang. A tall man entered, broad shoulders, weathered face, gray beard, cowboy hat dusted with snow. The room seemed to recognize him immediately. Several people greeted him by name. Luke Mercer, the rancher. Cole didn't know him yet, but he would. Luke ordered coffee, then noticed Cole. His eyes lingered for a second. Recognition, understanding. Then he walked over. You Ethan's boy? Cole nodded. Luke pulled out a chair without asking. Name's Luke Mercer, Cole. Luke studied him, the way old ranchers study horses, quietly, carefully, looking for weaknesses. Shadow watched him from beneath the table. Luke finally spoke. You staying up on Ethan's place? For now. Luke leaned back. The diner seemed quieter suddenly. People were listening, not obviously, but listening. Luke glanced toward the window, toward the mountains, then back at Cole. Winter comes early up there. I noticed. No. Luke shook his head. You haven't. Something about his tone made Cole pay attention. Luke pointed toward the mountains beyond town. I've buried friends up there. The words landed heavily. No humor, no exaggeration, just fact. Every year somebody thinks they can outsmart those mountains. Luke took a sip of coffee. They don't. Cole remained silent. Luke continued. You got firewood? Some. How much? Cole hesitated. Not enough. Luke nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. The snow comes hard in the Bitterroots. His voice lowered. When it decides to stay, roads disappear. Power lines snap. Men freeze 30 yards from their own front doors. A chill moved through the diner. Even Grace stopped wiping tables. Luke wasn't telling a story. He was delivering a warning. The kind old mountain people give when they know exactly how dangerous something is. You planning to stay up there all winter? That's the idea. Luke stared at him, then at Shadow, then back again. The silence stretched. Finally, Luke sighed. You're a proud man, Cole laughed. Used to be. No. Luke shook his head. You still are. His gaze shifted to Shadow. The German shepherd remained calm, alert, protective. Luke studied the dog for several seconds, then spoke words that would follow Cole for weeks. You'll bury that dog before Christmas if you stay. The diner became completely silent. Cole forced a smile. That's a hell of a thing to say. It's a hell of a winter coming. Luke stood, placed a few dollars on the table, then looked directly into Cole's eyes. Mountains don't care if you're Navy SEAL or ranch hand. His voice remained calm. They kill proud men every year. Luke turned and walked away. The bell above the door rang. Cold air swept inside. Then he was gone. The conversation slowly returned, but something had changed. Cole stared at his untouched coffee. Shadow rested his head against Cole's knee. The dog's warm weight felt reassuring, steady, alive. Cole scratched behind his ears. You hear that? Shadow looked up. Cole forced another laugh. Guess we're supposed to be dead by Christmas. But the joke didn't feel funny. Not anymore. Because outside the diner window, beyond the lights of Raven's Creek, the mountains waited beneath darkening skies. Silent, patient, and somewhere deep inside, a feeling Cole couldn't explain began to grow. A feeling that Luke Mercer hadn't been trying to scare him. He'd been trying to warn him. And for the first time since arriving in Montana, Cole looked toward the distant mountains and wondered if coming home had been a terrible mistake. Outside, the wind began to rise, and far above the valley, the first storm of the season gathered strength in the darkness. Cole Harper drove back up the mountain road, with the diner lights shrinking behind him. The truck's headlights cut narrow tunnels through drifting mist. Pine trees crowded both sides of the road. Their dark silhouettes seemed to lean inward as if listening. Shadow sat quietly beside him. Neither of them made a sound. Luke Mercer's warning echoed in Cole's head. You'll bury that dog before Christmas if you stay. Cole tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He hated how much those words bothered him. During 22 years as a Navy SEAL, he had heard far worse. He had walked through firefights, survived explosions, lost friends, buried teammates. Yet somehow an old rancher's prediction had found a place inside him that combat never reached. The cabin appeared just after dark, a single lonely shape against the mountainside. The clouds had thickened. Wind pushed through the trees with a low, mournful sound. Cole carried groceries inside while Shadow patrolled the property. The dog circled the cabin twice before finally coming in. The old wood stove still held a little heat from earlier. Cole added kindling and watched flames slowly grow. Orange light flickered across the walls. The cabin looked less abandoned that way, less haunted. He cooked a simple meal: beans, bread, coffee. Shadow ate from a dented steel bowl beside the stove. The familiar routine settled his nerves for a while. Then night arrived completely. The mountains vanished beyond the windows. The darkness felt absolute. Cole sat in an old wooden chair and studied the room. Every object belonged to Ethan Harper. Books, tools, photographs. A pipe resting on a shelf. The old man was everywhere and nowhere. The strange thing was that Cole had spent years convincing himself he hated his father. Yet now that Ethan was gone, all that anger seemed hollow. What remained was something harder to identify. Regret, maybe, or guilt. The wind struck the cabin suddenly. The walls creaked. A loose shutter slammed somewhere outside. Shadow lifted his head. Cole looked toward the window. The darkness beyond the glass reflected only his own face. Older than he remembered. Tired. The face of a man who had spent too many years running from himself. Around midnight, he finally went to bed. The bedroom was small. Just a narrow cot, a wooden dresser, a faded quilt. Shadow settled on the floor beside him. The dog always slept nearby. Always, even after retirement. Especially after retirement. Cole switched off the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. For a few minutes there was only the sound of wind. Then sleep came, and with it came Afghanistan. The dream began the same way it always did. A village, dust, heat, radio chatter, the smell of diesel fuel. Cole moved through narrow streets with his team. Shadow was there too, younger, faster, a military K-9 in body armor. Everything felt real, too real. Then the explosion came, the world erupted. Light, noise, pressure. Someone screamed. Someone always screamed. Cole tried to move, tried to help, but his legs wouldn't respond. The street dissolved into smoke, blood, chaos. The dream shifted. Faces appeared, teammates, men who never came home, men whose families still waited for answers. The radio crackled. The screaming returned, louder now, closer. Cole woke violently. His heart slammed against his ribs. His breathing came fast. Sweat covered his forehead. For one terrifying second, he didn't know where he was. The cabin disappeared. The mountains disappeared. Only combat remained. His hand shot beneath the pillow, searching for a weapon. There was none. The panic surged. Then something warm pressed against him. Shadow. The German shepherd had climbed halfway onto the bed. His muzzle rested against Cole's chest. The dog's eyes never left him. Steady, focused, present. Cole forced himself to breathe. In, out, in, out. Shadow stayed exactly where he was, not moving, not demanding. Simply there, a silent anchor. The panic slowly retreated. The cabin returned the walls. The stove the wind, reality. Cole rubbed Shadow's neck. The dog licked his hand once. A gesture so simple it nearly broke him. Good boy. His voice sounded rough. Shadow settled back onto the floor, but he remained awake, watching, guarding. The rest of the night passed in fragments. Cole drifted between sleep and memory. By dawn, he was exhausted. Gray morning light filled the cabin. Snow dusted the highest ridges. Winter was moving closer. Every day, every hour. Cole stepped outside with a mug of coffee. The air felt colder than the day before. His breath formed clouds. The property stretched silently around him. The cabin, the woodshed, the old well, the mountains beyond. Everything looked peaceful. But peace in the mountains could be deceptive. Cole knew enough about wilderness to recognize warning signs. The woodshed held less wood than he expected. Much less. After breakfast, he began counting, stack by stack, row by row. By noon, he had the answer, and he wished he didn't. The total amounted to less than 2 cords. Not nearly enough, not even close. Cole sat on a stump outside the shed. A notebook rested on his knee. He began calculating. Average winter temperatures, estimated burn rate, cabin size, insulation quality. The numbers grew uglier with every line. By the time he finished, he stared at the page in disbelief. The cabin would require nearly 20 times more fuel than he currently possessed. 20 times. He checked the math twice, then a third time. Same answer. A knot formed in his stomach. The situation wasn't bad. It was catastrophic. If winter hit hard, the existing supply might last only a few weeks, maybe less. The realization settled over him like cold water. Luke Mercer had been right. For the first time, Cole allowed himself to imagine the possibility. Maybe surviving this winter wasn't guaranteed. Maybe this mountain wasn't interested in second chances. Shadow approached and sat beside him. The dog seemed to sense the shift in his mood. Cole scratched behind his ears. You always did hate math. Shadow wagged his tail once. The gesture earned the first genuine smile Cole had managed in days. But it faded quickly, because the numbers remained. The mountain remained. The approaching winter remained. That afternoon, Cole began inspecting the property more carefully, searching for anything useful, anything his father might have left behind. Most of the outbuildings were empty. Rusty tools, broken equipment, scrap lumber, nothing valuable, nothing that would save him. The wind strengthened as evening approached. Dark clouds gathered over the western peaks again. A storm front, another one. Shadow wandered toward the back of the property, toward the old well. Cole noticed but paid little attention. The dog sniffed around the structure for several minutes, then returned. His paws were dirty. Cole frowned. The ground was frozen. There shouldn't have been much dirt available. Still, he dismissed the thought. Dogs investigated things. That was what they did. As darkness settled across the mountains once more, Cole stood on the cabin porch. The valley below disappeared beneath layers of shadow. Far away, a lone coyote howled. The sound echoed through the trees, beautiful, lonely, ancient. The wind carried it across the mountains. Cole listened until the sound faded. Then he looked toward the woodshed, toward the tiny pile of firewood, toward the winter already creeping down from the peaks. And for the first time since arriving at his father's cabin, genuine fear entered his heart. Not fear of enemies, not fear of combat, not fear of death, fear of failing, fear that Luke Mercer might be right, fear that no matter how hard he fought, the mountain might already have won. Behind him, Shadow stepped quietly onto the porch and sat at his side. The dog stared toward the dark outline of the old well, watching, waiting, as if he sensed something neither man nor mountain had revealed yet. Shadow remained motionless beside the porch railing. The German shepherd's eyes never left the old well. Wind moved through the pines. Dark clouds rolled across the distant ridges, yet the dog continued staring. Cole followed his gaze. The well stood nearly 50 yards behind the cabin. Weathered boards covered the opening. Grass grew around its base. Nothing remarkable, nothing important. At least that was what Cole believed, for now. He rubbed Shadow's neck. "Whatever you're looking at, I hope it burns." The dog glanced at him briefly, then returned his attention to the well. The behavior lingered in Cole's mind as he went inside. That night the temperature dropped sharply. Frost coated the windows by dawn. When Cole stepped outside the next morning, his breath immediately formed white clouds. Winter was advancing faster than he liked. The mountains surrounding the cabin looked different now. Colder, harder, less forgiving. The highest peaks wore fresh snow. The season had begun its march downward, and it wouldn't stop. After breakfast, Cole got to work. He had no choice. The firewood problem wasn't going to solve itself. His father's woodshed contained barely enough fuel for several weeks. Maybe less. If he wanted to survive, he needed more, much more. The old chainsaw hanging in the shed looked ancient. Cole spent half an hour cleaning it before finally pulling the starter cord. The engine coughed, died, coughed again, then finally roared to life. The sound echoed across the valley. Shadow barked once in approval. Cole smiled. "Let's see if we still know how to work." The nearest stand of dead timber sat halfway up a steep slope behind the property. Cole and Shadow spent the morning climbing through pine forest. Needles crunched beneath their boots. Cold sunlight filtered through branches overhead. The wilderness felt endless, beautiful, and completely indifferent. Cole selected a standing dead tree, not too large, not too small, perfect firewood. He positioned the chainsaw, pulled the trigger. The engine screamed. Wood chips flew. For a few moments everything felt manageable. Then pain exploded through his shoulder. Cole staggered. The chainsaw nearly slipped from his hands. He shut it off immediately. The familiar ache spread down his arm. Deep, burning, old. The injury came from Afghanistan. A roadside explosion. One of many scars he carried home. Most people never saw it, but he felt it every day. Especially when lifting. Especially when chopping. Especially now. Cole clenched his jaw. The tree wasn't even halfway cut. Shadow watched him carefully. The dog recognized the signs. Years together had taught him everything. Cole flexed his arm, waited, then started again. This time he finished. The tree crashed through the forest with a thunderous crack. Birds exploded from nearby branches. Silence followed. Heavy, complete. Cole leaned against another tree, breathing hard, one tree, and he already felt exhausted. The realization bothered him. A decade ago, he could have worked all day. Now his body demanded payment for everything. Every injury, every deployment, every year. By noon, he had managed 3 trees. 3. The pile looked embarrassingly small. Shadow wandered nearby, occasionally chasing squirrels or investigating scents hidden beneath fallen leaves. At least one of them seemed happy. Cole wiped sweat from his forehead. The temperature remained cold, but physical labor generated its own heat. He sat on a log and pulled out his notebook. Again he began calculating. Tree volume, burn rates, wood density, time remaining before heavy snowfall. The numbers grew worse, not better, much worse. At his current pace, he would need months. He didn't have months. He might not even have weeks. The math was merciless. By late afternoon, clouds covered the sun completely. The forest darkened, wind increased. The first snowflakes drifted from the sky, tiny, almost delicate. Yet they carried a message. Winter was no longer approaching. It had arrived. That evening, Cole drove into Raven's Creek for fuel and supplies. The diner glowed warmly against the gray weather. Inside, Grace Holloway greeted him with a smile. "You look tired. I feel older than I did yesterday." She poured coffee before he even asked. "That's mountain life." Cole glanced toward the window. Snow continued falling. Luke was right. Grace raised an eyebrow. "About what? The winter?" She sighed. "Most people don't listen to Luke until it's too late." As if summoned by his name, the rancher himself walked through the door moments later. Luke Mercer removed his hat, shook snow from his coat, then spotted Cole. The old man carried his coffee to the table without invitation. "How much wood you got now?" Cole laughed. "Not enough." Luke nodded. Exactly the response he expected. "Told you, yeah. Luke studied him. How's the shoulder, Cole? Froze. You can tell? I've been ranching 50 years. I can tell when a horse is favoring one leg. Cole couldn't help smiling. Luke pointed toward the mountains, visible through the diner window. Those slopes don't care about injuries, apparently. How many cords you think you'll cut before the first big storm? Cole hesitated. Maybe 2. Luke's expression hardened. You need 10. The words hit like a hammer. 10, Cole already knew. But hearing someone else say it made the situation feel real. Luke took a slow sip of coffee. Men half your age struggle with that. Cole stared into his cup. The silence stretched. Finally, Luke spoke again. You ever think about selling? The answer came instantly. Too instantly, Luke noticed. So you're staying. Looks that way. The rancher nodded, then surprised him. Good. Cole blinked. I thought you wanted me gone. I want you alive. Luke glanced toward Shadow lying near the counter. The dog had become something of a celebrity around town. Several customers had already slipped him treats. I just don't want you confusing stubbornness with preparation. The words lingered. Cole said nothing, because deep down he knew Luke was right. There was a difference, and he wasn't sure which side he stood on. The drive home happened under thick snowfall. Nothing dangerous yet, but enough to whiten the road, enough to remind him that time was running out. Back at the cabin, he unloaded supplies while Shadow explored the property. The dog disappeared around the back. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Cole finally called out. Shadow, no response. A strange feeling touched him. Not fear, concern. He grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the rear of the property. The beam cut through gathering darkness. Then he found the dog. Shadow stood beside the old well again. The German shepherd was digging furiously. Dirt scattered behind him. His paws worked with relentless determination. Cole frowned. What are you doing? Shadow barely acknowledged him. The dog sniffed the ground, circled, then resumed digging. Cole stepped closer. The soil around the well looked disturbed, freshly disturbed, as though something beneath it interested the dog enormously. Finally, Shadow stopped. He sat beside the well, panting, watching, waiting. Cole shined the flashlight across the weathered boards. Nothing, no movement, no animal sounds, no obvious explanation, just an old well. Yet the dog clearly believed otherwise. The wind strengthened. Snowflakes drifted through the flashlight beam. Cole sighed. Come on. Shadow hesitated, then reluctantly followed him. But halfway back to the cabin, the dog stopped, looked over his shoulder, and stared once more toward the well. The gesture sent an odd chill through Cole. That night, another nightmare came. Not combat this time, just endless snow. A blizzard swallowing the cabin. The fire dying, Shadow disappearing into white darkness. Cole woke before dawn, heart racing. The room was freezing. The fire had nearly gone out. He added another log, watched the flames struggle back to life, then looked out the frost-covered window. The mountains were white. The storm had left several inches of snow overnight. More importantly, winter no longer looked like a distant threat. It looked like a countdown. And somewhere beyond the cabin walls, hidden beneath snow and silence, Shadow's mystery remained. The old well waited. The dog knew something. Cole could feel it. He simply didn't know what. Not yet. But every day the firewood pile shrank. Every day winter grew stronger. And every day Shadow returned to the same forgotten place behind the cabin, as though an answer lay hidden there. An answer neither math nor preparation had revealed. An answer Cole Harper would soon be forced to find. The snow continued falling throughout the week. Not the heavy kind that buried roads. Not yet. This was worse in its own way. A slow, steady warning. The kind that settled into the mountains and whispered that larger storms were gathering beyond the horizon. Every morning Cole woke before sunrise. Every morning he fed the stove. Every morning he calculated numbers he hated. Firewood remaining, calories, fuel, days. The math never improved. It only became more urgent. By mid-November, his shoulder felt like it belonged to someone twice his age. The chainsaw broke twice. One tire on the truck developed a slow leak, and the mountain seemed determined to punish every effort he made. The only thing growing stronger was Shadow's obsession. The dog visited the well constantly. At first it happened once or twice a day, then 5 times, then 10. Eventually Cole stopped counting. Whenever he lost sight of Shadow, he already knew where the dog would be. The well. Always the well. One afternoon, Cole stood near the woodshed splitting kindling. The temperature hovered just below freezing. A sharp wind carried loose snow through the trees. He glanced toward the cabin. Shadow was gone again. Cole sighed. Let me guess. He set down the axe and followed the familiar path. Sure enough, the German shepherd sat beside the well, watching, waiting, the same behavior, the same intensity. But something had changed. The ground around the structure now showed signs of digging. Not random digging, focused digging. The dog had cleared several patches of dirt around the base. Cole crouched beside him. What exactly are you smelling? Shadow immediately stood. His tail stiffened. His ears rose. Then he placed one paw directly against the weathered wooden cover. Once, twice, 3 times. The movement looked almost deliberate. Cole stared. You want me to look? Shadow barked. A single sharp bark. Cole narrowed his eyes. For a moment he felt ridiculous, taking instructions from a dog. Then again, Shadow had saved his life more than once. Maybe twice. Maybe more. The military stopped counting after a while. Cole climbed onto the well platform. The structure looked ancient. Several thick wooden planks covered the opening. Snow collected in the cracks. A rusted chain wrapped around one side. Nothing unusual, until he noticed the carving, half hidden beneath dirt and moss. Cole brushed the surface clean, then froze, letters carved deeply into the wood. E.H. Ethan Harper. His father's initials. Cole stared for several seconds. The carving wasn't accidental. It had been placed there intentionally. The realization sent a strange sensation through him. His father had marked the well. Why? The thing was dry. Everyone in town knew that. Grace had mentioned it casually during one visit. Luke had called it Ethan's greatest waste of time. According to local stories, the old man spent years trying to find water. Years, and failed. People laughed about it. A stubborn fool digging a useless hole. Yet Ethan had marked it, protected it, maintained it. Why? Shadow began scratching again. Harder this time. Cole grabbed the dog's collar gently. Easy. The German shepherd pulled free and immediately resumed digging. Dirt flew. Snow scattered. The dog worked with increasing urgency. Minutes passed. Then something happened. A sharp yelp. Cole turned. Shadow stepped backward. One paw lifted. Blood dotted the snow. Fresh red against white. Cole's stomach dropped. Shadow! The dog had torn one of his pads. Nothing life-threatening, but painful, very painful. Yet even injured, Shadow tried returning to the same spot. The determination startled Cole. He knelt immediately, examined the paw. Clean tear, minor. Still, the dog barely seemed to care. His eyes remained locked on the well. Cole wrapped the injury carefully using supplies from a small medical pouch he carried everywhere. Years of military habit. Some habits never disappeared. You're impossible. Shadow nudged his shoulder. Cole laughed despite himself, then looked back at the well. The mystery no longer felt amusing, now it felt important. That evening the temperature plunged. The sky turned clear. Stars filled the darkness. Beautiful, cold, merciless. Cole sat beside the stove studying an old box of his father's belongings. Most items held little value. Receipts, photographs, notes, tools, nothing revealing. Then he found an envelope, yellowed with age, no stamp, no address. Just a folded piece of paper. Inside was a hand-drawn map. Cole unfolded it carefully. The cabin appeared, the woodshed, the tree line, the property boundary, and one location circled repeatedly, the well. His pulse quickened. He examined the drawing more closely. Near the well sat a tiny notation, almost impossible to read. He moved closer to the lantern. The words looked faded, weathered, but still visible. Keep covered, that was all. No explanation, no details, just 2 words, keep covered. Cole sat motionless. The cabin suddenly felt quieter. The wind outside seemed farther away. His father had left instructions. Not many, but enough. Keep covered. Why? A dry well didn't require protection. A useless well certainly didn't. Unless it wasn't useless. the thought returned. Persistent, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. Shadow lifted his head from beside the stove, watching him. Cole held up the map. You knew something was here, didn't you? The dog tilted his head. Cole shook his own. This is crazy. Yet the feeling remained, growing stronger. The next morning he made a decision. The weather forecast posted at the gas station predicted a major cold front within days. Temperatures would drop sharply. Snow accumulation would increase. Time was running out. If the well held a secret, he needed answers now. After breakfast, he gathered tools: crowbar, flashlight, rope, work gloves. Shadow practically danced when he saw the equipment. The dog's excitement confirmed everything. They walked together through fresh snow, toward the well, toward whatever waited beneath it. The wind blew harder than usual. Dark clouds gathered over distant peaks. Another storm, a bigger one. Cole stepped onto the platform, examined the wooden cover. Years of weather had aged it, but something felt wrong. The planks looked old, yet remarkably solid, too solid. Almost maintained, he knelt, ran his fingers across the surface, then discovered something hidden beneath accumulated dirt. Metal, a rusted latch. Cole blinked. His heartbeat accelerated. A latch, on a supposedly abandoned well. He cleared more dirt. More metal appeared. Not random hardware, a locking mechanism, carefully installed, carefully concealed. For several seconds he simply stared. The world seemed to narrow. The mountains disappeared. The wind disappeared. There was only the latch, and the impossible question forming inside his mind. What exactly had Ethan Harper been protecting? Shadow stood beside him, silent, focused, certain. The same certainty military dogs sometimes displayed during operations. The certainty that came when they found something humans missed. Cole reached toward the mechanism, his gloved fingers trembling slightly. Not from fear, from anticipation. The answer sat directly beneath his hand. After weeks of questions, after endless calculations, after every warning about winter, the mountain had finally offered something back. A clue, nothing more. Enough. Cole gripped the latch. Snow swirled across the clearing. The wind howled through the pines. And beneath the old well cover, hidden for years, beneath silence and secrecy, something waited in the darkness. Something Ethan Harper had spent tremendous effort protecting. Something Shadow had never stopped searching for. Something that would change everything. But not yet. Because the first secret was only beginning to reveal itself. Snow spiraled through the air. The wind pushed against Cole Harper's back as he knelt beside the old well. His gloved hand remained wrapped around the rusted latch. For several long seconds he simply stared. The metal was real. The mechanism was real. Everything he thought he knew about the well suddenly felt uncertain. Shadow stood beside him, silent, alert, watching, waiting. The same way he had watched doorways during deployments overseas. The same way he had watched suspicious packages. The same way he had watched for danger or discovery. Cole took a slow breath, then pulled. At first, nothing happened. The latch resisted. Years of rust and weather had frozen it in place. Cole adjusted his grip, pulled harder. A sharp, metallic crack echoed through the clearing. The mechanism released. Shadow immediately stepped forward. His ears stood upright. The dog could sense it. Something had changed. Cole brushed snow away and inspected the cover more carefully. Now that he knew where to look, additional details became visible. Heavy hinges, steel reinforcement, weatherproof seals. This wasn't the cover of a forgotten well. Someone had invested tremendous effort into protecting whatever lay beneath. Someone named Ethan Harper. The realization sent a strange sensation through Cole, a mixture of curiosity and sadness. How much of his father's life had remained hidden? How many things had he never bothered to understand? The questions followed him as he wedged the crowbar beneath the first plank. The wood groaned, then lifted. Cold air rushed upward from below. Not the bitter mountain cold, something different, cool, dry, stable. Cole frowned. That alone made no sense. A normal well should smell damp. Earthy, moist, this smelled almost preserved. He removed another plank, then another. and another, until a rectangular opening appeared. Darkness waited below. Complete darkness. Shadow leaned forward immediately. Sniffing, Cole switched on his flashlight. The beam cut downward. Stone walls appeared, carefully constructed, perfectly aligned. Not a crude farm well, something more sophisticated. A wooden ladder descended into the depths. Solid, well-built, maintained. The sight made Cole's pulse quicken. His father had never abandoned this place. He had hidden it. There was a difference. A very important difference. Cole secured a rope around a nearby support post. Military habits again. Never enter an unknown space without redundancy. Then he clipped the other end to his belt. Shadow whined. The dog clearly wanted to follow. Stay. Shadow immediately ignored the command. Cole smiled despite himself. Thought so. The first few rungs creaked beneath his weight. The flashlight beam danced across stone walls. 10 feet, 15, 20. The temperature remained surprisingly stable. The further he descended, the more unusual the structure became. This wasn't simply a well. It was engineered. Every stone appeared deliberately placed. Every support beam carefully fitted. Whoever built it understood construction very well. At the bottom, Cole stepped onto hard-packed earth. The shaft extended another few feet downward but contained no water. Bone dry, exactly as everyone had claimed. Yet that wasn't the important discovery. The important discovery stood directly ahead. A steel door. Hidden within the stone wall, Cole froze. His flashlight illuminated thick hinges and reinforced edges. The door blended so perfectly with the surrounding stone that it would have remained invisible from above. Only someone standing inside the shaft could find it. Shadow barked from above. The sound echoed downward. Cole moved closer, his pulse hammered. Questions flooded his mind. Why build a hidden door inside a dry well? What could possibly justify such effort? He grabbed the handle, twisted, nothing, locked. For a moment, disappointment surged. Then he noticed something hanging from the interior wall. A rusted hook, and dangling from the hook, a key. Cole stared. His father had left it there, not hidden, waiting. As though he expected someone to arrive eventually. Someone specific. The realization unsettled him. Cole inserted the key, turned. The lock clicked immediately. Smooth, maintained, used. The heavy door swung inward. A rush of cool air emerged. The flashlight beam swept forward, and Cole stopped breathing. Rows of stacked firewood filled the chamber. Perfect rows, perfect stacks. Neat, organized, preserved. The room stretched nearly 30 feet into the mountain. Every wall lined with wood, every inch utilized. Cole stood frozen. His brain struggled to process what he was seeing. Firewood. Thousands of pieces. Dry, protected. Ready to burn. For several moments he simply stared. Then a laugh escaped him. Half disbelief, half relief. He walked slowly through the chamber. The smell of oak filled the air. Rich, clean, dry, not a trace of rot. Not a trace of moisture. Whoever designed this place understood storage, understood airflow, understood preservation. And somehow Ethan Harper had done it alone. Cole ran his hand across one of the stacks. The wood felt perfect, as if it had been cut yesterday, not years ago. Hope surged through him, sudden, powerful, dangerous. For the first time since arriving in Montana, he saw a path forward, a future, a chance. The fear that had haunted him for weeks finally loosened its grip. He pulled out his notebook, began estimating volume, length, density, burn rate. The old military habit of calculating resources returned automatically. At first his excitement remained. Then the numbers emerged, and everything changed. Cole calculated again, then a fourth time. The answer remained identical. His smile disappeared. The chamber contained roughly 3 tons, maybe slightly more, an incredible amount, under ordinary circumstances. But not enough, not nearly enough. His chest tightened. The realization felt almost cruel. The discovery was miraculous, yet winter demanded more, far more. 3 tons might last several weeks, possibly a month, maybe 2 if rationed carefully. But the Montana winter could easily stretch beyond that. The mountains still won. Just more slowly. Cole sat down on an old crate near the wall, his flashlight resting beside him, The chamber suddenly felt smaller. The excitement faded, replaced by familiar reality. Not enough. The words echoed endlessly. Not enough. Shadow barked again from above. Cole closed his eyes. For one brief moment he had imagined salvation. Instead he had found temporary survival. A delay. Nothing more. Eventually he climbed back up. The afternoon sky had darkened significantly. Snow continued falling. Shadow greeted him immediately. The dogs circled excitedly, waiting for approval, waiting for celebration. Cole scratched behind his ears. "You were right." Shadow wagged his tail furiously. Cole laughed softly. "You're smarter than I am." The dog leaned against him. The simple contact helped. The disappointment remained. But so did the discovery. 3 tons. Not enough, yet infinitely better than nothing. The next several hours passed in hard work. Cole hauled armloads of oak from the chamber into the cabin. Each trip brought warmth. Each trip brought hope. Yet every trip also carried the same calculation. Not enough. As darkness settled over the mountains, firelight filled the cabin. The oak burned beautifully, cleaner than anything he had found on the property. Hotter, longer, more efficiently. Shadow stretched comfortably near the stove. For the first time in days, genuine warmth filled the room. Outside, snow covered the world. Inside, life felt possible again, at least temporarily. Cole sat at the table, studying the map from his father. Something continued bothering him. The chamber existed. The mystery was solved. Yet the map still felt incomplete. The notation near the well, the strange secrecy, the enormous effort required to construct everything. It seemed excessive. 3 tons of wood was valuable, but not valuable enough to justify years of hidden construction. Not valuable enough to explain Ethan Harper's obsession. Cole spread the map beneath the lantern, examined every detail. His eyes narrowed. A faint line extended beyond the circle around the well. Almost invisible. A pencil mark, barely there, leading toward another section of the property. The mark was so faint he had overlooked it before. Now he couldn't ignore it. Shadow lifted his head. The dog stared toward the back door, toward the darkness beyond, toward the well again. Cole followed his gaze. For several seconds neither moved. Then Shadow stood, walked to the door, and sat, waiting. The same behavior, the same certainty, the same determination. Cole slowly folded the map. A strange feeling settled over him. The first chamber had answered one question, but created another. Because Shadow wasn't acting like a dog who had completed his mission. He was acting like a dog who had only reached the first objective. Outside, the wind howled across the mountain. Snow piled against the cabin walls. And somewhere, beneath the property, hidden behind darkness and stone, secrets remained. The first chamber had given Cole hope, then stolen part of it away. But Shadow's eyes suggested something else, something unfinished. Something waiting. And for the first time since discovering the hidden room, Cole found himself wondering whether his father had hidden more than firewood beneath the mountain. Much more. The question followed him into sleep and into the nightmares. That night the wind battered the cabin long after midnight. The old walls groaned, loose boards rattled, snow hissed against the windows like sand against glass. Cole jerked awake with his heart racing. For a split second, he wasn't in Montana. He was back in Afghanistan, back inside a damaged compound, back beneath a collapsing roof, back hearing radio traffic that no longer existed. His breathing accelerated. His chest tightened. The room blurred. Instinct took over. His hand reached toward a rifle that wasn't there. Shadow was there first. The German shepherd lifted his head from beside the stove and crossed the room immediately. Without hesitation, he pressed his body against Cole's legs. Solid, warm, real. Cole squeezed his eyes shut, focused on the dog, focused on the weight, focused on the smell of fur and wood smoke. The flashback loosened, slowly, painfully. But it loosened. After several minutes, the cabin returned. The stove returned. Reality returned. Cole exhaled. Shadow remained beside him, watching, guarding, the same way he had done hundreds of times before. "Thanks, partner." The dog rested his head against Cole's knee. Outside, the storm continued building. Inside, neither of them slept much after that. By dawn, the mountains had disappeared behind curtains of snow. The world looked smaller, colder, more isolated. Cole spent the morning hauling additional wood from the underground chamber. Each trip strengthened his belief that Ethan Harper had built something extraordinary. Yet the nagging feeling remained. The chamber explained part of the mystery. Not all of it, not even close. The map remained spread across the table. Every spare moment he studied it, examined it, measured it. The faint line beyond the well bothered him more each day, and Shadow's behavior made it impossible to ignore. The dog kept returning outside, kept circling the well, kept staring toward the slope behind the cabin, as though something remained unfinished. 3 days later, the answer arrived, or at least the next clue. Cole followed Shadow into the trees. The dog moved with unusual confidence, not wandering, not exploring, leading. The distinction mattered. Military working dogs rarely moved without purpose, and Shadow was behaving exactly as he had during search operations years earlier. The trail climbed a ridge behind the property. Snow covered everything. Pines stretched toward a gray sky. The mountain felt ancient, silent, watching. Shadow suddenly stopped, 20 yards ahead. Cole joined him. The dog stood beside a mound of earth and broken stone. At first, it appeared natural. Just another section of hillside, damaged by weather. Then Cole noticed something strange. The rocks weren't random. Several pieces appeared cut, shaped, moved by human hands. Cole brushed snow aside. More stone appeared, then wood, old timber, buried timber. His pulse quickened. A structure, hidden beneath the hillside. Shadow barked sharply. The same alert bark he used during operations. Cole crouched lower, examined the area carefully. The earth had collapsed years ago, maybe longer. Part of the slope had caved inward. Whatever stood here had been buried beneath landslide debris and forgotten, or hidden. The distinction again mattered. Cole returned the following morning with tools: crowbar, shovel, rope, flashlight. The work consumed most of the day. By afternoon, he had exposed part of a wooden frame, then a doorway, then something that looked remarkably familiar, a ventilation shaft. His heart skipped. The underground chamber, not the chamber, another chamber, connected somehow. The realization hit hard. The first room beneath the well had never been the complete system. It had only been the beginning. Cole worked faster. Snow fell around him. His shoulders screamed with every movement, but excitement overpowered pain. Hours later, he finally exposed enough of the structure to enter. Shadow slipped inside first. Cole followed. The passage angled downward through the mountain. Narrow, dark, cold, yet remarkably intact. The flashlight beam revealed support beams identical to those beneath the well. The same construction style, the same precision. Ethan Harper had built both. There was no doubt anymore. The tunnel continued for perhaps 40 feet before opening into a larger space. Cole stepped inside, then stopped. The chamber stretched wider than the first, longer, stronger, but something was wrong. Part of the ceiling had collapsed. A massive section of rock covered nearly half the room. Snowmelt had seeped through cracks over the years. Ice coated portions of the floor. Several stacks of wood remained visible. Many more had been crushed. Cole slowly turned. The chamber contained additional firewood. A lot of it, but much had been destroyed. Some soaked, some rotted, some buried beneath fallen stone. The sight created conflicting emotions: relief, disappointment, confusion, hope, fear, all at once. This chamber confirmed Ethan's system was larger than expected, but it also proved time had damaged part of it. Cole estimated quickly. Perhaps another 2 tons remained usable, maybe 3. Still not enough, not yet. The numbers improved, but winter remained larger than the supply. Shadow moved deeper into the chamber, sniffing, searching. The dog's attention fixed on a collapsed section near the far wall. Cole followed. The rubble pile looked unstable. Fresh cracks spread across overhead stone. Something about it felt dangerous. Shadow barked, then barked again, more urgently. "What is it?" The dog pawed at the debris. Cole approached cautiously. His flashlight revealed a narrow gap between fallen beams. Air moved through it, a faint draft. His eyes narrowed. Air meant space. Space meant possibility. Before he could investigate further, a cracking sound echoed above. Every military instinct fired simultaneously. Cole looked up. Too late. A beam shifted. Stone followed. The mountain groaned. Shadow! Cole lunged backward. The collapse exploded through the chamber. Rock crashed downward. Timbers snapped. Dust filled the air. Cole hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his injured shoulder. His flashlight spun away into darkness. For several terrifying seconds, the world became noise. Stone, wood, impact. Then silence. Heavy silence. Cole coughed, forced himself upright. Dust drifted through the beam of his backup flashlight. The collapse had blocked part of the tunnel. A few more seconds, and he would have been directly beneath it. Dead? Maybe not. Buried? Certainly. Shadow appeared beside him instantly. The dog pushed against his chest, checking him, making sure he was alive. Cole reached for the dog's neck. His hands trembled. The realization arrived slowly. Shadow had warned him. Twice. The bark, the urgency, the insistence. The dog had recognized danger before he had. Again, just like years ago. Just like overseas. Cole swallowed hard, then looked toward the collapse. Dust continued falling from above. The blocked section now appeared impossible to cross. Yet something else caught his attention. Behind the fallen debris, far beyond the rubble, another opening remained visible, just barely. A dark void, a continuation. The tunnel didn't end here. It went farther, much farther. Shadow stared toward it, not frightened, not discouraged, focused, waiting, as if he knew the collapse hadn't stopped the mission, only delayed it. Cole laughed softly. The sound echoed through the damaged chamber. You really won't quit, will you? Shadow wagged his tail once. Nothing more. The answer was obvious. No, he wouldn't quit, and neither would Cole. Because for the first time since arriving in Montana, something stronger than fear had taken root. Purpose. The first chamber had given him hope. The second chamber had given him proof. Proof that Ethan Harper built an entire system beneath the mountain. Proof that more remained hidden. Proof that Shadow had been right all along. As darkness settled across the Bitterroot Mountains, Cole and Shadow emerged from the damaged tunnel together. Snow drifted through the trees. The storm clouds thickened. Winter drew closer. But now there was something else waiting beneath the mountain. Something beyond the collapse. Something hidden, even deeper than the chambers already discovered. And Shadow, despite everything, continued staring toward that buried opening, as if he could already see what waited on the other side, as if the true secret was still ahead. And somewhere deep beneath the mountain, beyond fallen stone and forgotten tunnels, Ethan Harper's greatest secret remained hidden in the dark, waiting. The storm arrived 3 days later, not as weather, as a force, a living thing, a white monster descending from the high peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains. Cole first saw it at sunrise. The western horizon had vanished, not hidden, gone. A solid wall of white stretched across the mountains, swallowing ridges, forests, and sky. Even before it arrived, he could hear it. A distant roar, like an approaching freight train. Luke Mercer had once described Montana blizzards in a single sentence. They don't come through the mountains. They become the mountains. Now Cole understood exactly what he meant. The first blast struck shortly after noon. Wind slammed into the cabin hard enough to shake the walls. Snow exploded sideways. Trees bent. Loose branches vanished into the storm. Within minutes, visibility dropped to less than 50 yards, then 20, then 10. By evening, the world outside the cabin no longer existed. There was only white. Endless white. Cole secured every window, checked every door, moved additional wood inside, filled water containers. Prepared exactly the way military training had taught him. Preparation brought comfort, control, structure. But the storm was bigger than preparation. By nightfall, the power failed. The cabin fell silent. Only the wind remained. The old stove glowed orange in the darkness. Shadow lay beside it, watching, waiting. Outside, the mountain disappeared completely. Cole sat at the table studying the faded map once again. The lantern light flickered. The faint line beyond the second chamber seemed more important than ever. Something remained hidden beyond the collapse. Something Shadow clearly believed existed. But the storm had ended all exploration. For now, the mountain had closed itself. Hours passed. The wind grew stronger. The cabin creaked constantly. Snow hammered the walls. At midnight, Cole finally attempted sleep. The nightmare came immediately. He was back overseas. Back in a mountain valley thousands of miles away. Helicopters overhead. Radio chatter. Gunfire echoing through darkness. A building collapsing. Dust everywhere. Then silence. The kind of silence that follows disaster. In the dream, he searched desperately, calling names, searching rubble, searching smoke, searching for people he could not find. Then the dream changed. The ruined building became the collapsed tunnel. The dust became snow. The voices disappeared. Only Shadow remained, standing in darkness, waiting. Then the dog vanished. Cole woke violently. His heart pounded. His shirt was soaked with sweat. For several seconds, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't remember where he was. The cabin walls seemed unfamiliar. The darkness felt wrong. The storm sounded like distant artillery. Panic tightened around his chest. His vision narrowed. The flashback had him, completely. Then Shadow moved. The German Shepherd crossed the room immediately. No hesitation, no uncertainty. The dog pressed against Cole's side, solid, warm, real. Cole focused on the sensation, the weight, the breathing, the familiar smell of fur and wood smoke. 1 minute passed, then another. Gradually, the cabin returned. The mountain returned. Reality returned. The panic loosened. Shadow remained beside him the entire time, as he always did. Cole wrapped an arm around the dog. Neither moved for a long while. Outside, the storm continued screaming across the mountains. Morning brought no improvement. The blizzard had intensified. Snow buried the truck almost completely. The woodshed disappeared beneath drifts. Even the nearest trees looked like ghosts. Cole opened the door briefly. The wind nearly tore it from his hand. Snow rushed inside instantly. He slammed it shut. The cabin shuddered. The mountain had become a prison. The realization settled heavily inside him. They were trapped, completely trapped. No roads, no neighbors, no help. Just a former Navy SEAL, a retired military dog, and a storm powerful enough to erase entire landscapes. The next 2 days blurred together. Feed the stove, melt snow, check supplies, feed Shadow, sleep when possible, repeat. The routine helped. Structure always helped. But the isolation slowly worked its way inside. The endless wind, the endless darkness, the endless confinement. All of it fed the memories, fed the petsty, fed the ghosts. On the third night, another flashback struck, worse than the first. Cole woke, convinced he was trapped beneath debris, convinced the cabin ceiling had collapsed. Convinced he couldn't breathe, he stumbled from bed, disoriented, half awake, half lost inside memory. He grabbed a lantern, opened the door, and stepped into the blizzard. The wind hit him like a wall. Snow instantly blinded him. The temperature felt impossible. His mind remained trapped between past and present. He took several steps away from the cabin, then several more. The world vanished. Nothing existed beyond swirling white. No landmarks, no horizon, no direction. The mountain could kill him in minutes. And in his confused state, he barely understood the danger. Then Shadow struck him. Literally, the dog launched himself forward, knocking Cole sideways into a snowdrift. The impact snapped him back to reality. For one terrifying second, he understood exactly where he was, and exactly what he had nearly done. He was 30 yards from the cabin, already struggling to see it. Another 100 yards, and he might never have found his way back. The realization chilled him more than the weather. Shadow barked repeatedly, urgently, commandingly, the same bark he used during operations when danger appeared. Cole grabbed the dog's collar. "Okay," his voice shook. "Okay." Together they fought through the wind, back toward the cabin, back toward survival. When the door finally closed behind them, Cole collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, ashamed, grateful, alive. Shadow sat beside him, watching, protecting. The dog had saved him again. Not from enemy fire, not from collapse, not from injury, from himself. Cole stared into the stove for a long time. The flames danced quietly, the only calm thing in the world. Outside, the white monster continued raging. Inside, the firewood pile slowly shrank. Every log mattered, every piece counted. The first chamber had bought them time. The second chamber had added hope. But the numbers remained dangerous. Cole knew it. The storm knew it. The mountain certainly knew it. By the fifth day, the blizzard reached its peak. The cabin vanished beneath massive drifts. Snow buried half the windows. The wind screamed continuously. The mountain no longer felt like wilderness. It felt like an ocean, and they were trapped inside a tiny wooden boat. That afternoon, Shadow suddenly stood, alert, focused, the same look, the same expression, the one that always appeared before discovery. The dog walked toward the back of the cabin, toward the direction of the hidden chambers, then sat, watching, waiting. Cole followed his gaze. The blizzard still raged. The mountain remained impossible. Yet Shadow stared toward the buried secrets beneath the snow, as though he understood something, as though he knew the storm would eventually end, and when it did, the search would continue. The dog wasn't interested in surviving the storm. He was interested in what waited beyond it. Cole slowly smiled. For the first time in days, maybe even weeks, because despite the fear, despite the isolation, despite the nightmares, one truth remained unchanged. Shadow still believed, and somehow that belief was becoming contagious. Outside, the white monster roared. Inside, a former Navy SEAL and his loyal K9 waited beside the fire. One fighting the mountain, the other fighting the darkness inside his own mind. Neither knowing that the greatest discovery of their lives waited beyond the storm. Deep beneath the mountain, hidden beyond collapsed stone. Patient, silent, and drawing closer with every passing day. The storm finally broke on the seventh morning. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It simply exhausted itself. The wind weakened. The snowfall stopped. The endless white sky cracked open to reveal pale blue beyond the clouds. For the first time in nearly a week, sunlight touched the Bitterroot Mountains. Cole stood outside the cabin and stared across the valley. The world looked transformed. Snow covered everything. The pines bent beneath heavy loads. The truck resembled a frozen monument. Massive drifts swallowed fences and trails alike. Yet the silence felt miraculous. After days of constant wind, the absence of sound seemed almost unnatural. Shadow stood beside him. His ears rotated constantly. Listening, scanning, watching, the dog looked energized, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Cole knew why. The search could begin again. By midday, he had dug a path toward the well and hauled additional wood from the underground chamber. The supplies bought them breathing room, but not certainty, not yet. The hidden passage beyond the collapsed tunnel remained unresolved, and Shadow clearly had no intention of forgetting it. The German shepherd paced constantly, circling the cabin, returning to the slope, returning to the buried tunnel, returning to the same place over and over. By the third trip, Cole finally laughed. All right. Shadow immediately stood, tail wagging. Mission accepted. Together they climbed toward the damaged entrance. The snow reflected sunlight so brightly it hurt the eyes. Every step crunched. Every breath produced clouds. The mountain seemed peaceful, but Cole knew better. Mountains often looked safest just before they reminded people otherwise. The collapsed tunnel remained exactly as they had left it. Broken beams, fallen stone, a narrow opening leading deeper into darkness. Cole switched on his flashlight. Shadow slipped ahead. The dog moved carefully this time. Slowly, methodically. Cole followed. The air inside felt colder than before. The damaged chamber stretched ahead. Dust still coated the floor. The collapsed section looked even worse in daylight. Several beams had shifted further. More cracks appeared overhead. Cole frowned. The structure remained unstable. Dangerously unstable. Yet something continued drawing them forward. Beyond the rubble. Beyond the blockage. Toward whatever Ethan Harper had hidden deeper inside the mountain. Shadow stopped beside the collapsed section, sniffed, then squeezed through a narrow opening between two fallen timbers. Cole stared. The gap looked barely large enough. Shadow! The dog ignored him. Seconds later, barking echoed from beyond the collapse. One bark, then another, then another. The signal was unmistakable. Come here. Cole crawled forward carefully. The opening was tight, painfully tight. Stone scraped his jacket. Dust filled the air. Several times he considered turning back. Then he saw light from his flashlight, reflecting off a larger space beyond. The passage opened. The tunnel continued. His pulse accelerated. Shadow waited several yards ahead, tail wagging, almost smiling. Cole stood and examined the area. The hidden passage angled downward. The construction matched everything Ethan had built elsewhere. Support beams, ventilation shafts, careful engineering. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional. The farther they traveled, the more certain Cole became. His father had spent years creating something beneath this mountain, something much larger than anyone imagined. The tunnel eventually widened, then widened again. The floor changed from packed earth to old wooden planks. Some sections had deteriorated. Others remained surprisingly solid. Cole moved cautiously, every step tested, every movement deliberate. The mountain remained silent, too silent. Then it happened. The floor disappeared. 1 second it existed beneath him, the next it didn't. Wood exploded downward. Cole fell, hard. The impact drove air from his lungs. Pain shot through his shoulder. His flashlight flew from his hand. Darkness swallowed everything. For several seconds he couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Dust drifted through the air. Somewhere above, Shadow barked frantically. Cole forced himself to focus. Training returned, assess injuries, control breathing, stay calm. Nothing felt broken, painful, very painful, but functional. He switched on a backup flashlight. The beam illuminated a nightmare. A support beam had collapsed across part of the pit. Stone debris surrounded him. The opening above looked 15 feet away, too high to reach. His stomach tightened. He was trapped. The realization arrived cold and immediate. The chamber floor had given way beneath decades of weight and age, and now he sat inside a hole deep beneath a Montana mountain, alone, almost. Shadow appeared at the edge above him. The dog barked repeatedly, his silhouette outlined against the light. "It's okay," Cole's voice echoed upward. The words sounded less convincing than he intended. Shadow vanished. For a terrifying moment, Cole thought the dog had left. Then scratching sounds began. Digging, rapid, desperate. The dog was trying to reach him. Cole closed his eyes briefly. Even now, even here, Shadow refused to quit. Minutes passed. The dog kept digging, kept barking, kept searching. Then a shower of dirt fell from above. Cole looked up. A small opening appeared, then widened further. Shadow's face emerged through the debris. The German shepherd squeezed forward. Farther, farther. Ignoring the danger completely, ignoring the collapsing dirt, ignoring everything except his partner. Shadow, stop. The dog ignored him, as always. One final push, and Shadow dropped into the pit beside him. Cole laughed despite the situation. "You are impossible." The dog immediately pressed against him, checking, inspecting, making sure he was alive. Then Shadow turned toward the fallen beam. Something about it had captured his attention. The dog began digging again, pawing, pulling, scratching. Cole watched, confused. Then he noticed something. A section of the beam had shifted, just enough. Beyond it sat another opening, another passage, another hidden route. His pulse quickened. Even trapped, they had found something. Cole crawled closer. The opening looked large enough to squeeze through. Maybe. The problem was the beam itself. One wrong movement could trigger another collapse. Yet there appeared to be no other exit. The mountain had made the decision for him. He had to continue, carefully, slowly. Cole worked for nearly an hour, moving debris, testing weight, creating space. Eventually, the opening widened enough. He crawled forward. The passage beyond sloped upward, a possible escape. Hope returned. Then a sharp yelp echoed behind him. Cole spun around instantly. Shadow stood frozen. One front leg lifted awkwardly. Pain flashed across the dog's face. A loose stone had shifted during the excavation. Not enough to crush him, but enough to strike his shoulder hard. Cole's stomach dropped. Shadow. The dog tried putting weight on the leg. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. Fear surged through Cole. Real fear. Not for himself, for Shadow. The dog had followed him into danger, protected him, refused to abandon him. And now he was hurt. Cole moved immediately, examined the injury. No obvious break, thank God. But the shoulder had taken a heavy impact. The dog trembled slightly, still trying to stay strong, still trying to keep working. Cole felt something tighten inside his chest, a deep emotional pressure he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. The truth, the simple truth. Shadow wasn't just a dog, hadn't been for years. The German Shepherd had become family, partner, friend, the last constant in a life filled with losses. And for the first time since arriving in Montana, Cole imagined losing him. The thought hurt far more than his own injuries, far more. Shadow licked his hand as if reassuring him, as if saying he was still here, still fighting, still loyal. Cole swallowed hard, then nodded. "Let's get home, partner." The climb back took hours. Pain slowed both of them. The mountain fought every step, but eventually the cabin appeared through the trees. Warm light glowed through the windows. Home, safety, temporary peace. That night, Cole cleaned Shadow's injury beside the stove. The dog never complained, never resisted, never showed fear. Just watched him calmly, trusting him completely. Outside, darkness settled over the valley. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Cole sat beside the dog long after treatment was finished. Neither spoke. Neither moved much. The emotional weight remained. Heavy, uncomfortable, because the mountain had revealed something important. Not another chamber, not another clue, something far more personal. The realization that even heroes can be lost. Even loyal partners can be hurt. Even the strongest bond can be tested. Shadow eventually fell asleep, his injured shoulder resting carefully against a blanket. Cole remained awake, watching the flames, thinking, remembering. And somewhere beyond the collapsed passages and hidden chambers, Ethan Harper's final secret still waited, closer than ever. Yet suddenly it felt less important, because tonight only one thing mattered: the dog who had followed him into darkness, the dog who had refused to leave him behind, the dog who had risked everything to save him. And for the first time since returning to Montana, Cole Harper found himself afraid. Not of winter, not of the mountain, not of the secrets hidden underground, but of losing the one soul who had never once abandoned him. For 3 days, the search stopped. Not because Cole Harper wanted it to, because Shadow needed him. The German Shepherd's injured shoulder forced a different kind of mission: rest, recovery, patience. 3 things Cole had never been particularly good at. The cabin became a quiet world of routines, fresh bandages, warm meals, careful observation. Every morning, Shadow tested the injured leg. Every morning, he tried to pretend nothing was wrong. Every morning, Cole ordered him back onto the blanket. The arguments always ended the same way. The dog obeyed, reluctantly. Outside, winter tightened its grip on the Bitterroot Mountains. The temperatures dropped lower. The nights grew longer. The snowpack deepened, and every evening Cole studied the map. The faded pencil lines, the hidden markings, the clues his father had left behind. The mystery had become something larger than survival. It had become a conversation across time. A father speaking to a son through stone, timber, and silence. On the 4th morning, Shadow stood without hesitation. No limp, no hesitation, no visible pain. The dog stretched, walked across the room, then looked directly at the back door. Cole laughed softly. "You've waited long enough, haven't you?" Shadow's tail thumped once. Mission resumed. The next day dawned cold and clear. The sky looked like polished steel. The mountains glowed white beneath fresh sunlight. Beautiful, deadly, perfect. Cole packed carefully. Rope, lanterns, food, medical supplies, tools, everything a SEAL learned never to forget. Then he and Shadow climbed back toward the collapsed tunnel. The mountain greeted them with silence. No wind, no birds, no movement, only snow and sunlight. The damaged passage looked unchanged, but now Cole noticed something different. The opening shadow had helped uncover during the collapse appeared larger than before. Winter movement, freeze and thaw. The mountain itself had shifted, creating opportunity. Shadow slipped through immediately. Cole followed. The tunnel beyond felt older than the other chambers, older than the visible construction. The support beams appeared heavier, the stonework more elaborate. His flashlight revealed markings carved into certain sections. Not words, measurements, survey markings, construction notes, his father's handwriting. Cole touched one of them. A strange feeling settled over him. Ethan Harper had stood here years ago, working alone, planning, building, preparing. For whom? The answer increasingly seemed obvious. For him. The tunnel descended deeper, far deeper than expected. The air changed. Cooler, drier, stable, exactly like the first chamber. Eventually the passage widened, then widened again, then opened completely. Cole stopped. Shadow stopped. Neither moved, neither spoke. The flashlight beam disappeared into darkness. Not because it failed, because the space was enormous. His pulse accelerated. Slowly he stepped forward. The light swept across rows. Endless rows, stacked wood, perfectly preserved, perfectly organized, perfectly protected. The beam continued moving, and the rows continued, and continued and continued. Cole felt his mouth go dry. The chamber stretched beyond visibility, like a warehouse buried beneath the mountain, like an underground cathedral dedicated to survival. He walked forward slowly, his boots crunching against packed earth. The scale became clearer, then impossible, then unbelievable. The chamber wasn't measured in cords, or stacks, or piles. It was measured in tons. Cole began estimating automatically. Length, width, density, volume. Years of military logistics resurfaced. The numbers formed, then reformed, then became impossible to ignore. 20 tons, at least, possibly more. 20 tons. His flashlight lowered slowly. The realization crashed into him. 20 tons. Enough for years. Enough for multiple winters. Enough to survive anything Montana could reasonably unleash. Enough to help neighbors. Enough to save lives. Enough to change everything. For a long moment, Cole simply stood there, unable to process it. The fear, the desperation, the endless calculations, the sleepless nights, the panic, all of it suddenly collided with overwhelming relief. His knees nearly gave out. Shadow walked beside him quietly, as if the dog already knew, as if this had been the destination all along. Cole laughed, then laughed again. The sound echoed through the giant chamber, half joy, half disbelief. His father hadn't left him firewood. His father had left him security. Then Cole noticed something else, a section of wall near the rear of the chamber. Different from the others, not wood, not stone, shelving, carefully constructed shelving. The sight pulled him forward. Shadow followed. The closer they moved, the stranger it became. Boxes, crates, folders, metal containers, items protected from moisture and time. Cole approached slowly, his pulse once again accelerating. The first crate contained photographs, dozens of them. Family pictures, old ranch photos, images of Ethan Harper as a younger man, pictures of Cole as a child. Cole froze. He hadn't seen many of them in decades. His father rarely displayed photographs, rarely talked about the past. Yet here they were, preserved, protected, saved. The second crate contained letters, carefully bundled, labeled by year. The third held military documents, official paperwork, newspaper clippings, service records, deployment announcements, promotion notices, photographs from training. Cole stared, confused. Why would his father keep these here? Then he found the journals, 5 leather-bound journals, weathered but intact, each labeled with dates, each written in Ethan Harper's handwriting. The sight sent a chill through him. These weren't random keepsakes. This was an archive, a record, a message, a story, one deliberately preserved beneath the mountain, waiting for him. Cole sat down on a crate. The enormous chamber stretched behind him, 20 tons of firewood surrounding them like silent guardians. Yet suddenly the wood felt secondary. The journals mattered more, far more. Shadow lay beside him, resting his head against Cole's leg. the same position he always chose during difficult moments. Cole picked up the first journal. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, from anticipation. The cover opened. The first page revealed a date from nearly 12 years earlier, and beneath it, a single sentence, written in Ethan Harper's unmistakable handwriting. "If my son ever comes home, he will need more than firewood." Cole stared. His heartbeat slowed, then accelerated, then slowed again. The mountains seemed to disappear. The chamber seemed to disappear. Only those words remained. "If my son ever comes home." The sentence felt personal, direct, intentional, as if his father had reached through time itself. Cole swallowed hard. Shadow remained motionless. The dog somehow understood the importance of the moment. The silence stretched. The giant chamber waited. The journals waited. The answers waited. And for the first time since arriving in Montana, Cole realized that the greatest discovery beneath the mountain was never the 20 tons of firewood. It was the reason they existed. The reason Ethan Harper spent years building chambers no one knew about. The reason he hid photographs, letters, records, memories. The reason he prepared for a future that had not yet happened. A future involving a broken Navy SEAL, a loyal dog, and a son who thought he had nowhere left to go. The firewood had kept people alive, but the journals promised something else. The truth. And somewhere within those pages, Ethan Harper's final secret waited to be revealed. The underground chamber felt impossibly still. 20 tons of firewood surrounded Cole Harper and Shadow like silent walls of history. The flashlight rested beside him. The journals sat in his lap. For a long moment he simply stared at the first page. "If my son ever comes home, he will need more than firewood." The sentence seemed to echo through the chamber. Not because it was loud, because it was personal. Cole swallowed hard, then turned the page. The handwriting remained neat and deliberate. Every line looked carefully considered, every word chosen with purpose. The first entries described construction, excavation, measurements, ventilation systems, drainage channels, timber supports. The journals read almost like engineering notes. Yet beneath the technical details ran something deeper. A concern, a worry, a father's quiet fear. Cole continued reading. Hours seemed to disappear. The entries moved through years. One season after another. One winter after another. Then the tone began to change. The construction notes became personal, more reflective, more emotional. One entry stopped him cold. March 14. Cole was promoted again today. He sounded proud on the phone. I told him congratulations. I did not tell him he sounded tired. The words blurred slightly. Cole blinked. His father had noticed. Years ago. Long before anyone else mentioned it. Long before he admitted it to himself. He kept reading. June 3. Cole says everything is fine. Men who say everything is fine usually aren't. I know because I've said it myself. Cole exhaled slowly. The chamber suddenly felt smaller. The mountain suddenly felt closer. Another page, another entry, another revelation. September 27. His marriage is struggling. He didn't tell me directly. A father learns to hear the things his children avoid saying. I wish I knew how to help. Cole closed his eyes briefly. The memory surfaced immediately. Phone calls cut short. Conversations avoided. Silences stretched longer each year. He had assumed his father didn't notice. Assumed wrong. Very wrong. Shadow rested quietly beside him. The dog seemed content simply to remain there. Present, steady, grounding. The same way he always had. Cole turned another page and another. The years continued. The entries became heavier, darker, more concerned. Then he found the one that changed everything. The journal entry was dated nearly 10 years earlier. Cole read it twice, then a third time, unable to believe it. A former military friend called today. Didn't share details, didn't need to. He said Cole has seen too much. He said many men come home, carrying battles nobody else can see. If my son ever reaches a point where he cannot carry them anymore, I want him to have somewhere to come. Cole stared at the page. His breathing slowed, then stopped, then resumed. His father had known. Not everything, not specifics, but enough. Enough to worry, enough to prepare. Enough to spend years building something most people would call irrational. The chamber, the wood, the tunnels, the journals, all of it for him. The realization landed with overwhelming force. Cole leaned back against one of the crates, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. The rough timbers blurred. For years he had believed himself alone. After retirement, after divorce, after losing the structure that had defined his life, the loneliness became part of him, permanent, unavoidable. Yet here, deep beneath a Montana mountain, evidence surrounded him that one man had been thinking about him all along, preparing for him, planning for him. The journal remained open in his hands. Cole continued reading. November 11, Veterans Day. People thank soldiers for their service. Very few ask whether they are all right. I hope someone asks Cole someday. If they don't, I hope this mountain does. Cole laughed once, a short, broken laugh. Then the emotion hit, not gradually, not gently, like a wave, powerful, unexpected, impossible to stop. He lowered his head. The years collapsed. The deployments, the injuries, the divorce, the truck, the loneliness, the endless pretending, the endless insistence that he was fine. All of it surfaced at once. For the first time in decades, Cole Harper cried. Not because he was weak, not because he had failed, because he finally understood something. His father had seen him, truly seen him. Not the Navy SEAL, not the decorated veteran, not the strong one, the son, the human being, the man beneath all the armor. Shadow quietly moved closer. The German shepherd rested his head against Cole's leg. No barking, no movement, no interruption, just presence. Exactly what was needed. Minutes passed, perhaps longer. Eventually, Cole wiped his eyes. Embarrassed, despite being completely alone, he looked down at Shadow. The dog stared back calmly, as if nothing unusual had happened, as if this moment had been inevitable. The next journal waited. Cole opened it. The final entries had been written shortly before Ethan Harper's death. His father's handwriting appeared shakier, more fragile, yet the words remained clear. January 8th, the doctors say my heart is failing. I suspected as much. The mountain climbs feel steeper every week. No reason to tell Cole. He already carries enough. Cole felt his chest tighten. He turned the page. February 19, finished the third chamber. 20 tons total. Enough for years, perhaps too much. But fathers are allowed to over-prepare. The sentence made him smile despite himself. Then came the final pages. The final entry, written only weeks before Ethan died. Cole read every word slowly. If you are reading this, then you came home. Maybe life hurt you. Maybe people hurt you. Maybe you simply got tired. Whatever brought you here doesn't matter. You made it. That is enough. The mountain will take care of the rest. The chambers aren't a gift. They are a bridge, something to carry you until you remember who you are. The tears returned immediately, not violent, not overwhelming, just honest. Cole sat silently for a long time. The chamber remained unchanged around him. 20 tons of firewood, rows of journals, photographs, letters, a lifetime of preparation. Yet everything looked different now. Because now he understood the purpose. The chambers were never about survival. Not really. They were about love, a practical kind of love. The kind expressed through labor, planning, sacrifice, years of effort nobody would ever see, until they needed it. A movement beside him broke the silence. Shadow had fallen asleep. The dog snored softly. One paw stretched forward, the injured shoulder finally healing. Cole smiled. His father had built the chambers. Shadow had led him to them. Both had saved him in different ways. The realization settled deeply. For the first time since arriving in Montana, peace replaced fear. Not completely. Winter still existed. Problems still existed. But something inside him had changed. The mountain no longer felt like a place of exile. It felt like home. As evening approached, Cole carefully packed the journals into waterproof containers. He wasn't leaving them behind. Not anymore. The photographs followed. The letters followed. Every piece mattered. Before leaving, he looked around the enormous chamber one final time. The scale still amazed him. 20 tons. Years of work, years of planning, years of hope. His father's final rescue mission. A rescue mission launched long before anyone realized it would be needed. Shadow woke as Cole stood. The dog stretched, then moved beside him, ready to leave, ready to continue. Together they started toward the tunnel, toward the surface, toward the cabin waiting above. Neither noticed the distant sound outside, the sound of an engine, the sound of tires on snow, the sound of someone arriving on the mountain. Because, while Ethan Harper's greatest secret had finally been revealed, the fight to protect it was only beginning. The snowstorm had finally loosened its grip on the Bitterroot Mountains. Days passed beneath clear blue skies. The valley glittered beneath fresh snow. Smoke rose from ranch chimneys. Frozen creeks reflected pale winter sunlight. For the first time since arriving on the mountain, Cole Harper felt something close to stability. The cabin was warm. The wood supply was secure. Shadow's shoulder was healing, and the journals rested safely beside Ethan Harper's old desk. Yet peace never lasted long. Not in the mountains, and not in life. The trouble began with a single truck. 3 days after discovering the third chamber, Cole stepped outside just after sunrise and saw tire tracks climbing the old logging road. Fresh tracks, recent. Nobody came up this mountain by accident. Shadow saw them too. The German shepherd immediately stiffened. His ears rose, his gaze fixed on the road below. A low growl vibrated deep inside his chest. Cole followed the dog's stare. Minutes later, a black SUV appeared between the pines. It climbed steadily toward the cabin, expensive, polished, completely out of place in the wilderness. The vehicle stopped near the cabin. A man stepped out, mid-50s. Well-dressed, clean boots, expensive coat. The kind of man who looked more comfortable in boardrooms than mountain valleys. Shadow moved closer to Cole's side, watching, evaluating. The stranger smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was a calculating one. "You must be Cole Harper." Cole nodded. "Who's asking?" The man extended his hand. "Wes Thornton." Cole didn't take it. The smile remained unchanged. "I own several properties throughout western Montana." "I don't care." Thornton laughed softly. "I've heard that about you." Shadow's growl deepened. The investor glanced toward the dog. "A military working dog." Cole said nothing. Thornton's eyes shifted toward the well, then the cabin, then the surrounding mountain. Calculating. Always calculating. Finally, he looked back at Cole. "I came to discuss your property. It's not for sale. I haven't made an offer. You don't need to." The silence stretched. Cold air drifted through the pines. Somewhere a raven called. Thornton studied him carefully, then he spoke. "The underground chambers have generated quite a bit of attention." Cole felt his stomach tighten. So it had already spread. Small towns never kept secrets, especially valuable ones. "What chambers?" Thornton smiled again. "The ones containing 20 tons of preserved hardwood." Cole's expression didn't change. Years of military discipline helped with that. Inside, however, alarms were already sounding. How much did this man know? How many people knew? Thornton continued. "Interesting engineering. My father built them. So I've heard." The investor removed a folder from his vehicle. Inside were papers, maps, property surveys, legal documents. Cole immediately disliked everything about it. "Your father accumulated quite an unusual asset. It's firewood. It's value," Thornton corrected him. "There's a difference." Shadow stepped forward. Thornton stopped talking. The dog wasn't barking, wasn't lunging, just staring. The effect was enough. Even confident men became careful when a retired military canine focused on them that way. Thornton cleared his throat. "I'll be direct." "Good. The chambers significantly increase property value." Cole crossed his arms. So ownership may not be as straightforward as you believe." The words hung in the cold air. Cole felt old anger awakening. The same anger he had spent years trying to control. The same anger PTSD often amplified. He forced himself to stay calm. "What exactly are you saying?" Thornton opened the folder. There were unresolved tax issues connected to neighboring land acquisitions. "They weren't mine." "Perhaps not. Then we're done." Thornton's smile disappeared. For the first time, his real personality emerged. Cold, patient, predatory. "You should speak with an attorney." Then he climbed back into the SUV. The vehicle disappeared down the logging road, leaving silence behind, and a knot of unease growing inside Cole's chest. That evening, he drove into town. Shadow rode beside him. The diner was busy. Locals filled booths. Coffee steamed beneath warm yellow lights. Grace Holloway looked up as Cole entered. The widow immediately noticed something was wrong. "You look like hell." "Thanks. I mean worse than usual." Cole actually smiled, slightly. Grace poured coffee before he even sat down. "What happened?" Cole told her. "Not everything, but enough." By the time he finished, Grace's expression had hardened. "Wes Thornton? You know him?" "Everybody knows him." She leaned closer. "He buys struggling properties." "Legally? Mostly." The answer wasn't reassuring. A familiar voice interrupted. Luke Mercer slid into the booth. The old rancher removed his gloves. "I heard." Cole sighed. "How?" Luke shrugged. "Small town." That was answer enough. The old rancher listened quietly, then nodded. "Thornton's dangerous, I figured. But he's smart." Luke pointed toward Cole. "Which means you need somebody smarter." The diner door opened. A thin man carrying a leather briefcase stepped inside. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, sharp eyes. Grace smiled. "Perfect timing." The man approached. Luke gestured toward him. "Mason Reed." The newcomer extended a hand. Unlike Thornton's, this gesture felt genuine. Cole accepted it. "Mason's the best attorney within 100 miles. Mason sat down. "I've already heard rumors." Cole stared. "How many people know about those chambers?" The attorney smiled. "Enough." That wasn't encouraging. For the next hour, Mason reviewed everything. The inheritance, the journals, the property records, the construction dates. Every detail mattered. Finally, he leaned back and smiled. A very different smile than Thornton's. This one carried confidence. "Good news." Cole waited. "Your father was meticulous." That sounded accurate. Mason tapped the table. "Extremely meticulous." "What does that mean?" "It means Ethan Harper documented everything." Cole blinked. "What?" "The county archives contain permits," Luke laughed. "Of course they do," Mason continued. "Survey records, construction filings, property improvements." Cole stared. His father had documented the chambers? Every single phase, every single year. The attorney nodded. "As far as the law is concerned, your father built legitimate improvements on legally owned land." Relief washed through Cole. Slowly, carefully. Not complete relief, but enough. Thornton might create problems, but he couldn't erase facts. Mason gathered his papers. "If he files a claim, we fight it." "You think he will?" The attorney's expression turned serious. "Absolutely." Cole looked toward the diner window. Snow drifted softly beneath streetlights. The mountains waited beyond town, silent, watching. For months he had been fighting winter. Now another battle approached. Different, but just as important. The battle for his father's legacy. The weeks that followed proved Mason right. Thornton filed formal challenges, property assessments, valuation disputes, inheritance reviews, paper attacks, legal attacks, every possible angle. Yet something unexpected happened. The town responded, one person at a time. Then dozens, then more. Luke Mercer spoke publicly. Grace organized support. Veterans traveled from neighboring counties. Ranchers submitted statements. Neighbors signed petitions. People who barely knew Cole stepped forward. Not because of the wood, not because of the chambers, because they understood what Ethan Harper had built and why. A father preparing for a son. A veteran finding his way home. A dog refusing to quit. The story spread, and with every retelling, support grew. One snowy evening, Cole stood outside the courthouse after another hearing. The mountains glowed pink beneath sunset. Shadow sat beside him. Luke stood nearby. Grace carried coffee. Mason held a stack of legal papers. And behind them stood nearly 50 people, waiting, supporting, believing. For years, Cole had lived alone. Now he looked around and saw something unfamiliar. Community, family, a place to belong. Thornton exited the courthouse. He paused when he saw the crowd. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. He finally understood. This fight was no longer about property. It was about people. And people were far harder to defeat. The final ruling would come soon, very soon. And when it arrived, it would determine whether Ethan Harper's legacy survived, or whether everything he built would be taken away. The decision was only days away. Winter still covered the Bitterroot Mountains. Snow blanketed the valleys. The pines stood silent beneath white crowns. And high above them all, Ethan Harper's cabin waited on the mountainside, warm, steady, alive. Cole Harper stood beside the old well at sunrise. His breath drifted into the cold air. Shadow sat beside him. The German shepherd's muzzle was beginning to show strands of gray. The injury had healed. The limp was gone. Yet age was beginning to leave its marks. For a long moment neither moved, neither needed to. The mountain felt different now. Months earlier it had seemed like a place of exile, a final stop for a broken man. Now it felt like home, a home worth fighting for, a home worth keeping. The final hearing arrived 3 days later. The county courthouse overflowed. People filled every seat, then the walls, then the hallway outside. Veterans, ranchers, teachers, business owners, neighbors, men and women who had spent their lives in the Bitterroot Valley. Many had never met Ethan Harper. Many barely knew Cole, yet they came anyway, because some stories belong to entire communities, and Ethan's had become one of them. Cole sat beside attorney Mason Reed. Shadow lay quietly at his feet. Across the room sat Wes Thornton. The investor appeared calm, professional, controlled, but something had changed. The confidence was gone. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The evidence had become overwhelming. Years of permits, construction records, engineering plans, property documents, tax filings, personal journals. Everything proved the same thing. Ethan Harper had legally built every chamber, every tunnel, every improvement. The mountain belonged to the Harper family, and always had. The judge entered. The room fell silent. Papers shuffled. A clock ticked somewhere near the rear wall. Then came the ruling. It lasted less than 10 minutes. Yet every word felt monumental. The court rejected Thornton's claims, rejected every challenge, rejected every attempt to seize the property. The ruling confirmed Cole Harper as the sole legal owner of the land, the cabin, the chambers, the well, everything. The judge's final sentence echoed through the room. This property remains exactly where it belongs. Silence followed, then applause, not courtroom applause, human applause. People standing, smiling, celebrating. The kind of applause that comes from relief. Cole sat motionless. For a second he couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't think. After months of uncertainty, the fight was over. He looked down. Shadow stared back at him, tail slowly wagging as if the dog had expected nothing less. Outside the courthouse, the town gathered. Luke Mercer shook his hand first. The old rancher's eyes looked suspiciously wet. "Told you those mountains kill proud men." Cole laughed. "You did." Luke pointed toward him. "But they didn't kill you." Grace Holloway hugged him before he could object. "You finally look alive again." Maybe she was right. Maybe he did. Even Mason Reed smiled, which seemed to surprise Mason Reed more than anyone else. The weeks became months. The months became years. And slowly something remarkable happened. The mountain changed. Not physically. Emotionally. Word spread among veteran organizations, among support groups, among families. People began arriving, former soldiers, former Marines, former airmen, former sailors, men and women carrying invisible wounds, people who understood silence, people who understood loneliness, people who understood what it felt like to come home different. Cole never intended to create anything. It happened naturally. One visitor became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became dozens. Eventually, Ethan Harper's cabin transformed into something entirely new, a retreat, a refuge, a place where veterans could breathe, talk, heal, or simply sit quietly beside a fire. The giant wood chambers made it possible. Every winter, the fireplaces burned. Warmth filled the rooms. Stories filled the evenings. Laughter slowly returned to lives that had forgotten how. The old journals became part of the tradition, not displayed, not treated like museum pieces, shared. Visitors read passages, particularly one, the line everyone remembered. "If my son ever comes home, he will need more than firewood." Those words helped people, perhaps because everyone understood them. Everyone needs more than survival. Everyone needs hope. The years continued moving forward. The mountain remained, the retreat grew. New cabins appeared, trails were cleared. Memorial benches overlooked the valley, and always Shadow remained nearby. Older, slower, but still loyal, still watchful, still Cole's shadow. One winter evening nearly a decade later, snow fell softly outside the main lodge. Veterans gathered around the fireplace. Coffee steamed, logs crackled. The room glowed with warmth. Cole sat in his usual chair. Shadow lay beside him. The dog no longer heard well. His eyesight had faded. His steps had become slower. But his presence remained exactly the same, steady, comforting, constant. Cole rested a hand on the dog's neck. The old German shepherd leaned into the touch. For a moment, everything felt perfectly still. The next spring, Shadow passed away peacefully. No storms, no emergencies, no fear, just sleep. The same way loyal companions often choose to leave quietly. Cole buried him beneath a pine tree overlooking the valley. The entire town attended. Veterans traveled from across the state. Luke Mercer came. Grace Holloway came. Mason Reed came. People who had never met Shadow came. Because they knew. They understood what the dog had done. How many lives had changed because he refused to stop digging beside an abandoned well. How many people had found hope because one loyal K9 never gave up on his partner. After the service ended, Cole walked alone to the underground chamber, the largest chamber, the one that had changed everything. Rows of firewood still stretched into darkness. Not 20 tons anymore, but plenty remained. Enough for years, enough for whoever might need it next. He carried 2 items, Shadow's military collar and Ethan Harper's journal. Carefully, he placed them side by side on a wooden shelf. Father, dog, both guardians, both rescuers, both gone, yet somehow still present. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A loose board behind the shelf. Cole frowned. He had never noticed it before. He pulled it aside. A single envelope rested behind it, yellowed with age. His name written across the front. Cole. Nothing else. His hands trembled slightly. Slowly he opened it. Inside was one final letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ethan Harper. Cole sat down, then began reading. The letter was short. Only a few lines. Yet every word mattered. If you're reading this, then both of us succeeded. You survived. Not the winter, not the mountain. Life, that was always the mission. The tears came immediately. Not painful tears. Grateful ones. The kind that arrive when a journey finally reaches its destination. Cole folded the letter carefully, then looked around the chamber, the wood, the stone, the tunnels, the years. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. His father had not built a storage system. He had built a lifeline, a bridge, a second chance. The same way Shadow had become a second chance. The same way the mountain had become a second chance. That evening, Cole climbed back to the surface. The sun was setting. Golden light spilled across the Bitterroot Mountains. The valley glowed beneath the fading sky. He walked to the old well, the place where everything had begun, the place where Shadow had refused to quit, the place where Ethan Harper's love had waited patiently in the dark. Cole stood quietly beside it. The wind moved softly through the pines. Far below, lights glowed from the retreat. Veterans gathered around fires. Laughter drifted through the evening air. Life continued. Healing continued. Hope continued. The firewood remained. The father's love remained. The dog's loyalty remained. And the broken Navy SEAL who had once arrived with nothing finally understood the truth. He had never been abandoned. Not by his father, not by his dog, not even by himself. The mountain had simply been waiting for him to come home. And at last, he had. If Ethan Harper's story touched your heart, comment yes if you believe. Real love is shown by what we build for the people we care about. And if you've ever had a loyal dog, a mentor, or a family member who helped you through a hard season of life, share where you're watching from and tell us about them. Remember, the strongest foundations are built on loyalty, perseverance, and hope. And if you enjoy stories about justice, dignity, and never giving up, subscribe and join us for the next journey.